Alright guys, what's up? Rosario here, back with another video. Today we'll be taking another break from the usual fitness content and we'll be discussing movies, especially movies in 2026, because it has been a wild ride so far and we still have a few months to go, so who knows what's gonna happen by the end of the year. We've had few surprises like Project Hail Mary, who did really well with critics and fans, and it did a lot of money and it almost seemed like Hollywood was back on track. Then we had not so surprising successes like Toy Story 5 and Michael, which is now the highest grossing biopic ever, even surpassing Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer. But also we had major disappointments like Disclosure Day, which is probably the proof that that Steven Spielberg should stop making movies at this point and should just retire. Then obviously we had a very predictable failure, which is Supergirl, which is the second movie in James Gunn DCU. With a budget similar to Superman, it's gonna be a miracle if that movie makes 200 million at the box office. So it's gonna lose Warner Brothers a lot of money, and it's probably gonna determine the eventual death of this new cinematic universe. But that's not what I wanted to focus about in this video. I wanted to talk about two movies that really generate waves, and they're still making people talk about them even months after they were released, which are Obsession and Backrooms. Now, since you can find the full plot on Wikipedia, I'm not gonna go into a full plot breakdown. You can just easily find that online. So if you miss some of the pieces that I'm talking about, you can just catch up with the plot online. And also, unless it wasn't clear, I'm gonna go into some spoilers in this video, so you are warned. Now, when it comes to the story behind Obsession, it's not really that revolutionary. It's a story about Bear, who's madly in love with Nikki, childhood friend and colleague. She apparently doesn't have any feelings for him. He's frustrated because he cannot pluck up the courage to tell her, and he feels like he's running out of time because all of a sudden she tells him that she's quitting the job, so he doesn't know if he's gonna be able to see her that much. So basically what he does, he found himself into a weird random shop and buys this device, this supposed magical device called the One Wish Wheel. At first he doesn't think much of it. He obviously thinks of it as a joke, and he wants to give it to Nikki, but out of frustration for the whole situation he ends up using it himself, and he wishes for Nikki to love him above everything else. He first thinks that he's just wasted the money for that stupid magic trick, and that's pretty much it. But then the wish triggers a horrific change in Nikki. Basically what happens is she starts descending into madness and becoming more jealous and more possessive as the movie goes, and starts committing horrific acts. Now again, this is very generic because I don't want to spoil too much, but you can find all the other info on the plot online. Now, I wanted to talk about the scenes that actually impressed me the most about this movie. I think, first of all, the most important scene in the movie is the one where Bear is trying to sneak out of bed to meet with his friend Sarah, but he doesn't want to wake up Nikki because he's afraid of what Nikki's gonna do. But the one that wakes up is not the monster, is actually the real Nikki, the one that's still buried underneath, the one that's basically imprisoned by the wish. And she tells Bear that she's in pain and suffering, she doesn't know what's going on, and she just begs Bear to kill her. Now that scene, I thought it was very impactful, and for a second Bear is actually considering and concerned about what he's done and about the consequences of his wish. But then he basically reveals himself for who he really is, which is the villain of the movie. And is just frustrated at Nikki because she doesn't love him and she doesn't show like any sign of care for the pain that Nikki is going through. So basically he's just an insecure, cowardly and selfish individual. And although is Nikki the one committing those horrific acts, actually in a way, like indirectly, Bear is in control of her because he knows what's the one way to free Nikki from his wish, which is to kill himself or to have someone to do a counter wish. Now that scene was very, very powerful, and it carries into the next scene, which is when Bear actually meets with Sarah and Nikki sneaks up on them and kills Sarah, brutally kills her in front of Bear. Bear at first is surprised and shocked and horrified by what he's seen, but then he just passively accepts what he sees because he knows that that's how Nikki is now, and it's clear that he has no intention of freeing her. Now the fact is that Bear has had many chances during the movie to do it, and he never did it because he's so selfish and self-centered that he'd rather have the horrific version of Nikki rather than saving her and accepting that she doesn't have feelings for him. And the irony is that Sarah had feelings for him, and they would have maybe ended up together if Nikki didn't kill her. So he actually, there's some sort of like karma and irony in that scene. But then what really stood out to me is also the finale, which actually was a bit reminiscent of Romeo and Juliet in a way, because you have like Nikki that's basically like descending more and more into madness, and she's becoming uncontrollable even for Bear. So after seeing what she's capable of, Bear decides that enough is enough, and although he doesn't want to do it, the only way to end this is to kill himself. So he grabs a bottle of oxycodone and he chugs it, and then before he, and in a way at first you think, okay, like we're going through a redemption arc for this character, so that would have added a lot of depth to Bear. But at the same time, Nikki in the other room breaks another one wish willow and wishes for Bear to love her, because Nikki feels that, like the monster Nikki feels like Bear is not in love with her. Again, another irony of the movie. So basically, in that split instant, like Bear regrets his choice and tries to puke out, but then is overtaken by the wish. So he's so inebriated with love for Nikki that he goes into the other room to join Nikki, but then the pills start doing their effect, so Bear basically dies into Nikki's arms and then makes her snap from the trance, and she just realizes what she has done and the horror that's around her, and she starts screaming in pain and devastation for what has happened to her. So that I thought was an extremely powerful finale for the movie. I think the thing that I find most interesting about the movie is how ambiguous like good and bad are. Like Bear's wish was made out of love, but at the same time, like when he had the chance to tell how he felt about Nikki, like he couldn't do it. So also like he was overthrown by fear, which in a way is the opposite of love. And then like rather than accepting the reality of things, like he kept living this illusion, which is basically the fact that you cannot create love. Like you can wish for $1 billion, and Bear's friend does it in the movie and he gets it and there's no repercussions. So, but when you try to wish for someone to love you or anything that has to do with feelings, that's not something that you can manufacture, because then you just get the distorted version of it and you need to be ready to pay the consequences for it, because wishing this on someone is just gonna corrupt the person and gives you the worst version of them. So that I thought it was a very powerful note to end the movie on, and those are basically the things that impressed me the most about the movie. Well, for one, like is actually a scary movie, which is not a given for today's horrors. So props to Curry Barker, the director, for actually making the movie scary and not just, I don't know, like jump scares and things like that. Like the movie is very good at establishing the scene and then making it progressively weird and creepy, and then gives you the jump scare. So you're always kind of like on the edge of the seat, and you're kind of like walking on eggshells, because you know that you cannot trust any scene, even if it looks what's happening seems innocent. You know there's something horrific is coming, and it always comes. So yeah, that's pretty much what I thought about Obsession. It's a great movie. The great thing is that it was done for very low budget, about I think $750,000, and it's making well over like $400 million. So it means that people are not tired of going to the movies. They just want to see good movies. They want to see original projects and actually directors being creative with their work. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about is the Backrooms. Now, the Backrooms in a way is quite different from Obsession, because I had no idea about the amount of lore that was behind this movie. So first of all, like the Backrooms, like what are the Backrooms? So it's this extra dimensional space that you can access to a portal by no clicking, which means it's basically like a glitch in a video game where you exit the reality and then you enter this new area, which is the Backrooms. The aesthetic is based around the concept of a liminal space. So you have these, basically the Backrooms are these infinite succession of empty rooms. They're very reminiscent of office spaces, but imagine all the furniture has been taken out. The wallpaper is yellow, like it almost looks like sickly yellow. The carpet looks stale and old, and the fluorescent lights are humming very loudly. So what is basically the liminal space is sort of like transitionary space from one space to the other. So imagine like a hallway, for example, which takes you from like the room to the reception of the hotel. But those spaces, in a way, they are nostalgic, because it reminds you of something. Like, you know that even if you haven't been exactly there, you have been to a very similar place. So they have that nostalgic element about it. At the same time, the total absence of people from the Backrooms and the liminal spaces in general, it is very upsetting, and I don't know, like the feeling of the eeriness, the creepiness, they start, I don't know, building in you, because you feel that there's something wrong, but you cannot quite put your finger on it. So what is in simple terms the plot of the movie? Now again, I'm not gonna go into many details, but Clark is a failed architect. He owns a furniture store. He's going through divorce, and he's talking about it with his therapist. He's sleeping at the store because it's quite low on money, because the store is not doing too well. And one night the lights start acting really weird, and basically he finds a weird switch that is not connected to anything. So he doesn't think too much of it at first, but then one night, like these lights start acting in a very weird way. And for a second we see a glimpse of the Backrooms in the TV. So he investigates the basement where the electricals are, and then he notices a strip of light in the wall, and by touching it, he basically falls into the Backroom. So he accesses this reality. At first, curiosity got the best of him, and he tries to explore it a little bit, but in a way, like he fears that he's gonna get lost in there, and also he feels like at some point he's sure that something is following him and he's trying to capture him, so he escapes very quickly. Then he goes to talk about it with his therapist, which obviously doesn't quite believe him, but at the same time the therapist has like weird memories about something that might be connected to the backrooms. That's why he doesn't, like, he takes what he's saying seriously. So Clark decides to go again into the backrooms to explore them. This time takes with him Kat, which is his employee, and Bobby, her boyfriend, which is also cameraman. So they go into the backrooms, they start exploring everything, and basically something horrific happens. So basically Clark remains trapped into the backrooms, and at some point he sends basically a very cryptic message to her psychologist because he wants to prove her that the backrooms really exist. Mary, the psychologist, gets it, and he decides to investigate the issue herself. So since he hasn't heard from Clark in a while and she's getting worried, she decides to go to the store, which has been clearly closed for a while. She goes into the basement and finds the map to the backrooms and then the entrance to the backrooms. So she goes in there too, and what happens is at some point she's captured by Clark. She wakes up and basically she has to face the monsters inside the backrooms, barely escapes it, and then she's captured by Async, which is the organization that investigates the backrooms and trying to find the mysteries within it. As you can see, obviously I glimpse over a lot of details of the plot because again I don't want to spoil too much and I want you to really see this movie. If you're really curious about the plot, go check it out on Wikipedia. So also maybe you can get the context on some of the things that I'm gonna mention. Now, some of the scenes that stood out to me the most about the backrooms is, and also it's a recurrent theme throughout the movie, is Clark's refusal to basically accept his own faults. The fact that his marriage ended because he was violent, because he was drinking too much, he was spending too much time at work. So those themes are basically repeated throughout the movie and explored. Actually explored through the backrooms, which I found very fascinating. For example, like we have one of the scenes that I think very most meaningful, which is when the psychiatrist reenacts the dinner scene with Clark, which is the one where they had the fight that led to their divorce, and Clark tried to blame everything on either external circumstances or on his ex-wife or on money or this and that, but never for once he felt like he expressed that he was sorry or he apologized to his wife or tries to blame himself for the way things basically went out. So there's one of the scenes in the backrooms which is still very mysterious, but a lot of people, especially on Reddit, they have a lot of opinions about it, and that's the Christmas tree scene. Basically, Clark is escaping one of the entities, the one that has killed Bobby and that was chasing Kat and him, but he ends up in this room where there's nothing but a red light and the lights from a Christmas tree. So one thing that struck me first of all is that usually the backrooms are very bright, as opposed to other horror movies where you normally find the monsters where it's the darkest, but here is like the backrooms are actually very well lit, and that's what makes you feel uneasy. But then you have this room which is completely dark, and then the only light is red, which is already kind of like signifying like danger, like something's wrong with that, and that's why the Christmas tree looks a bit creepy in a way, because it's illuminated by this red light. And Clark, like, it looks like he's troubled by what he sees, but we don't know exactly what's happening. So I think like this was similar to the dinner scene that we're gonna see later, because it is one of the moments where probably Clark was too drunk and he came back home late, and he was, he unleashed his frustration on his ex-wife because he's not happy about the job, he's not happy about the money, he's not happy about the career. So all of these scenes basically are condensed in these backrooms that are just created to torture Clark. Hopefully also in a way tries to make him understand that he's the main responsible for his own fate. But Clark just refused to accept it. And that's very clear also in one of the final scenes, which is the dinner scene, where he's sitting in this living room inside the backrooms, which is basically a distorted version of his own life, of his own memory. And Mary has to portray his ex-wife, and then they have the same exact discussion that led to their divorce. And Clark one more time refuses to take responsibility for it. At some point, the main entity, which is Pirate Clark, shows up, which is a giant and distorted version of Clark dressed in a pirate outfit, like the logo in his Ottoman Empire furniture store. And Clark tries to calm the entity by saying to them that they don't need to change, it's okay, it's just the way they're wired. And the entity at first seems like he wants to hug Clark to find comfort in this, but actually he ends up killing Clark. So Clark in a way gets killed by his own distorted version because of his refusal to accept reality. That's when Mary tries to escape, and then she's captured by the async agents. Another scene that I thought it was very intimidating in a way, it was the first scene, which in a way it catapults you straight away into this world, and you don't even have time to wonder where the backrooms are, how to access them. You just in the middle of them. And honestly, I was on the edge of my seat the whole time, because what the backrooms have that other movies don't have is that when it's building suspense, is built by the absence of pretty much everything. Because in a way, some other horror movies, they create this creepy scenario where you are expecting something horrible to happen, but the backrooms at first, they just feel like a sequence of rooms and nothing really special about them. Then slowly you start seeing elements from the real world but in a distorted version, things that really don't make sense. So that's when you start feeling like something's wrong and you need to get the hell out of there. And that's when also the entities start to show up and follow you around to try to kill you. So I found that, the beginning of the movie very fascinating, because it establishes straight away that despite what they look like, the backrooms are not safe. Another peculiarity is that time is not linear. So what happens that the backrooms is almost like it's the collection of everything that's ever been. So it's both present, past, and future all at the same time. For example, when Clark enters the backrooms for the second time and is there with Bobby and Kat, we see Bobby's and Kat's shoes on the floor, semi-submerged. Then we see his shirt that says "End Apartheid" in one of the rooms where he's killed. So all of these elements foreshadows how they're gonna end, but also show us that even if they've never been there, the backrooms already has recollections of them. Also, we see in the end that Mary distorted memory is now an established part of the backrooms. And so it's almost like the backrooms collects informations on people, but as the movie also says multiple times, the more it tries to remember, the worse it does. So the backrooms will always have something that kind of resembles reality, but it's not quite it. And that's why I found Clark a very fascinating protagonist, because he's actually he becomes quite comfortable in the backrooms because he can just deny reality and accept the reality of the backrooms as his own reality, because in the backrooms he actually doesn't have to change, because then he can, the backrooms can just adapt to the way he is. And that's in a way shows the refusal of Clark to improve. So it's almost like the opposite of a character arc. And that's why in a way I think also Clark is a bit of a villain in this movie, because a lot of people died because of him, people get hurt because of him, but even though it's clear that it's his fault, he just refuses to accept it, and he'd rather blame everyone else for it. So what I would say, like, what got me into the backrooms also is the immense lore behind it. In case you don't know, like, the origin of this place is from a post on the image board website 4chan. So someone posted the photo of the backrooms with a creepy caption that says that basically the backrooms are just made of these endless rooms with mono yellow wallpaper and steel carpet and the hambas of the neon light. And if you think that something is following you, you're probably right, and that thing that's following you has probably heard you too. So that basically generated a massive movement online, and people started coming up with their own backrooms related stories and videos. But then that's when Kane Pearson came into the picture, which is the director of the movie. And he was so disappointed with the poor quality of the footage that he decided to do it himself. So he started this web series of 22 episodes, which did incredibly well and amassed millions and millions of views, and that's what basically led to the Backrooms movie. So it's really like an incredible succession of events that we rarely see in cinema. The other thing that, like, I wanted to compare these two movies, like Obsession and Backrooms, by first talking about the directors, because first of all, they're both very young. They're in their 20s. They're both YouTubers of all people. They're both at their debut as directors, and they both took concepts that are relatively easy, but turn it into an interesting concept by actually working really hard on the story, which is something that we're sorely missing on today's movies. So they basically showed Hollywood how you don't need a $200 million budget to make a good movie. You just need a good story, a solid performance from the actors, and then you just need to be bold and explore interesting concepts. Now, what I would say about the comparison between these two movies, well, they're both horror movies, but they are quite different in a way. The Backrooms is more of a psychological thriller, because the very idea of this endless space in a way is claustrophobic, so you feel like you're trapped in this place, you cannot get out of there. You feel helpless because it looks like you're alone, but at the same time you're scared because you might not be alone. So the not knowing that is actually what's really scary, because once you've established that someone is chasing you, you can just run. So but going through these endless corridors and empty spaces is just so unnerving and so otherworldly in a way. Obsession is more, I would say, a traditional horror movie. So it has a certain cadence where it first establishes a normal scene where we get to know the story, the characters, etc. Then it slowly turns a normal scene into a creepy scene by adding weird elements, and then it gets you with the jump scare. When you think that you're safe, that's when you know you're not. So in a way, like, they explore horror in different ways, but also it's different because the how can I say, like, the Obsession movie is more about, like, interpersonal, I would say, relationships, because it shows how fear of expressing how you feel about someone can lead to catastrophic consequences. And also what's very important from the movie that we understand is that it is impossible to manufacture love, because they're just gonna corrupt the person and makes basically a distorted version of them. When it comes to the backrooms instead, it's almost like this purgatory-like place, which is the place between, again, like we get into the liminal space aesthetic, which is the transitory place between hell and heaven. So the backrooms basically becomes this place where you can only escape if you accept the mistakes you make and you try to change. So that's why I think Mary was able to escape the backrooms, because she actually made peace with herself, with her past, with her trauma, and she was able to escape the backrooms. Although we don't know what actually happens to them, to her after the movie, like after she's captured by Async. So in a way, it's more like a psychological study on human nature and how our refusal sometimes to change a situation and to accept the fault, like to take responsibility basically for our own life. Now, I loved both, but for different reasons. So let me know in the comment which one is your favorite, what are the scenes that really stood out to you the most. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.